Hey, Omar here, the Knife Shark Guy, and I am back with another fun-filled video for you. And today I just wanted to go over some knives that I own in my collection. These are production knives that I currently have in my collection. I got rid of a lot of my collection to start a new collection of South African custom knives, which is what I'm into now, higher-end South African knives. But that doesn't mean that I don't like production. I still do. These are 6 of the production knives that I currently own. This is my second go-around in production knives. When I first started collecting, I didn't know anything about knives. I just kind of went with what looked good. And to be honest with you, even though I've been collecting knives for about 8 years now, I still do that. I'm sure a lot of you guys do that. You buy knives that are aesthetically pleasing to your eye at first, and then when you've spent some time with the knife and you've used the knife, and you get a chance to maybe rate its performance on how the knife works for you, then you pretty much become an expert on that particular piece. And that's what's happening with me right now. I'm sure that's happens with all of you guys. But just about every knife on this table that you see, I've had before. I just basically rebought them, or I've done something to the knife. Particularly, I'm going to put these two aside, particularly these 4 knives here. This is kind of a special little collection. These 4 knives here, not counting these 2, in fact, I'll put these away. We'll look at these in a minute. But I've done this video before. These are actually 4 of the best production knives that I think are out there right now, based on my own personal taste. But keep in mind, it's not just my own personal taste with these 4 knives. I've actually used all these knives. I've actually had the opportunity to use them in every situation possible, and they seem to hold up on every end of my knife experience. So I just kind of wanted to go over these knives real quickly. So basically, the 4 of these knives have actually changed. I used to own all these knives as just regular knives when they weren't not anything special, but they were not changed aesthetically. So, I mean, obviously the Benchmade Anthem, one reason why I own this knife is because it's an integral piece. It's an all one-piece titanium knife. It's probably the best Benchmade ever, in my opinion. Not just in fit, finish, and quality, although everybody knows Benchmade has had quite a few. Benchmade has actually had quite a few quality issues over the years. I still believe they still do. However, this particular model didn't seem to have any. I mean, I bought this knife like 3 times. And I bought it 3 times just only because I started collecting South African knives. I had to get rid of the knife again, but I always wanted to have this knife in my collection. This was the 3rd time buying it, and it's going to stay in my collection. I'm not going to get rid of it anymore. It's just going to stay. But the fact that it's an integral piece, the fact that it's CV20 steel, the fact that it has a newly improved access lock with the coil spring, giving it an even smoother action. One of the main reasons I own this knife is because the deployment is unlike any other knife out there in the market with that access lock working with the coil spring. And everybody that owns Benchmade knives, they know the access lock. But this is an improved version of that, because instead of there being an Omega spring inside this part of the knife, they actually have a spring that adheres to the back of the knife, which means that it's a much more stable system. On the original Omega spring, you cannot just only pinch one spring and have the knife close like that. Because the Omega spring was so unstable, you would get sort of this wobbly feeling in the knife. That's not to say that the Omega spring isn't a good system. It is a good system, but this is just far more superior. So that's why this knife was in my collection. And of course, I had to do a little bling to it with the Timascus pocket clip made for me by Adam Purvis. Had to have that because the pocket clip that came with the knife originally was just really crappy. I didn't particularly care for this for the pocket clip. It was one of those pocket clips that actually matched the titanium scale, or the titanium on the knife, the integral knife, but it just didn't work really well. It was one of those pocket clips where it would lose its spring, and then you'd have to remove it and pound it down, and every so often you'd have to unscrew it, pound it down, just to get some sort of a spring on it. So it basically, the pocket clip that originally came with this knife, it looked good, but it just didn't function as well as I like, so I had Adam Purvis do that for me. The second knife in my collection, everybody knows, this is a limited edition Kershaw bare-knuckle knife. With M390 steel on it. What is so attractive about this knife is there are quite a few things aesthetically. First of all, it's a nice black wash knife, which means that if you're going to be using it, it's going to be hiding the scratches. It's a high-end steel, being M390. Secondly, and finally, the most amazing thing about this knife is how light it is, because it's an all-carbon fiber knife. That's another reason why I had to have this knife in my collection. I originally owned the original bare knuckle, excuse me, in 14C28N. I thought it was a really great knife, really great action. I thought the color of the knife, that bland gray color, just wasn't doing the knife justice, so I got rid of it. And waited a long time for them to come out with a newer version of the knife, or a limited edition version of the knife, and thank God they did. And they came out with this carbon fiber, all carbon fiber knife with a black wash blade on it, and M390 steel, plus, of course, the subframe lock, which I think is one of the most genius systems there are out there on a pocket knife, because it's not using the entire frame, cut out the entire frame to create the lock. Basically what they do is they cut out a section of the knife, and then they insert a couple of screws in there to fit in what's called a subframe lock. So it's kind of like an outside liner lock type knife, if you want to call it. That's basically the concept of a subframe lock, is to make it be like a liner lock without it actually being a liner lock, and yet still retaining the properties of a frame lock. So it's the best of both worlds. That's one of the reasons why I had to have at least one or two subframe locks in my collection. I think the subframe lock is such an important, it's an important system in the knife world. I'm really happy with the person that actually came out with that, because it really is genius. Obviously, the Spyderco Swish Bowie was another knife that I had to have. This is one of the knives that Nick Shabazz came out with, kind of like overemphasized so much that everybody in the entire world had to have one of these. And when they finally got one of these Spyderco Swish Bowies, it jacked up the price to astronomical. I mean, and now, unfortunately, you can't get one of these without paying at least $700 for the knife. Not only because it's discontinued, but it was such a well-publicized knife. It's such a I guess, well-loved knife, and it certainly highlighted Marcin Swish's work as a knife maker, and now he's pretty much become legendary because of this knife. And of course, my version of the knife, I decided to have it Cerakoted. After so many years of being in my collection, I kind of got tired of that gray, and I had it sent to a friend, Josh, at Razor's Edge, who Cerakoted the knife for me, and I got it with the gold and black and gold with a silver backspacer. And the only thing I didn't customize was the pocket clip, because I thought, you know, pocket clip is silver, so make the backspacer also silver. So a little change to the knife. And that was the whole point of all of these knives. These are all sort of very well-known knives, very special knives. but I didn't want to have them in my collection again unless they could be changed in some way. So now we get down to the final knife in this sort of 4-set series. So once again, we've got Benchmade, we've got Kershaw, we've got Spyderco, and we've got Zero Tolerance. 4 of my favorite knife companies and 4 of the best knives from those knife companies. At least that's what I think. So the final knife, of course, is the iconic knife that Zero Tolerance is well known for. The 00562. A lot of you guys are aware that this knife actually came out in like 4 different blade versions. It originally came out in M390, then they switched over to I believe it was CTS 204P, and then they changed over to CV20. I mean, it just, for whatever reason, the knife just kept changing the blade, but they're all the same steel. All those 3 steels that I just mentioned are exactly the same steel. Why they changed over, I don't know. I don't have a clue. In any case, my version was the downgraded version of the 0562 in Elmax steel. That's what I have on this blade here, particularly is Elmax steel. This knife has been well used. You know, there's a few little crappy marks on there. I use this knife quite a bit. That's how much I love it. And again, I wanted to have the knife in a different version, so I went out and I got these scales for it. The carbon fiber scales, I changed them over to these sort of sculptured 3D carbon fiber scales, scale on it. I had to have that. And then I got these ice blue titanium screws, and then the pivot. More important, and of course the over travel stop was changed over as well as the standoff. So the entire knife was redone. Like I said, I wanted to have the knife in my collection again in a different way so I can really enjoy it the way I wanted to. And that's not all I've done to this knife. We've also replaced the ball bearing system inside here with ceramic ball bearings. As all of you know, this knife is KVT, Kershaw Velocity, which means it's a caged bearing system. But the cage bearing system that originally comes with this knife is a plastic casing, right? And the ball bearings are steel. In this case, I've got a steel casing. And inside the steel casing are a bunch of ceramic ball bearings, which makes it an even smoother action. Ceramic ball bearings are much more spherical. They also do not have, you don't have to worry about oiling them because ceramic ball bearings do not create any friction at all. They stay cool, so therefore you're able to not have to worry about oiling the knife, and it also gives it a much more almost fall shut drop down action. Whereas, you know, with the original ball bearing system that came with the knife, you can probably have that same smoothness, but you'd have to do some work to it, maybe oil it down every once in a while. So that's it for these 4 knives. You know, from Benchmade, Kershaw, Spyderco, and Zero Tolerance. Like I said, these are my 4 favorite production knives that I own in my collection from 4 of the best knife companies out there. I think these are the best of everything that each one of those companies has to offer, and that's why they're in my collection. The last 2 here, I just got them because, you know, again, I like how the knives looked aesthetically, but still, nevertheless, they are really great knives. The Kershaw Knockout. This is the only spring assist knife I'm ever going to own. I am not a big spring assist fan, but if I'm going to be a knife collector, I gotta have at least one really great spring assist, and I chose this knife. This is the Kershaw Knockout in M390 with the stonewash blade. You know, the 1870 in all carbon fiber. This was a limited edition, again with the subframe lock that I love so much. But this knife, you could probably still get this. I don't know what it goes for, but I think the knife originally went for something like 125 bucks, and now I think the knife is already being sold on eBay for like ridiculous prices, almost up to $200 now for one of these. You know, it is what it is, but it's still a great knife. The fact that it's all carbon fiber, again, that carbon fiber is always a big selling point for me because it really makes the knife really light. And if they mix it with a subframe lock, that's another turn on. And then, of course, you know, when you get the blades, the blades are either stone washed or black washed. Who doesn't love that? I mean, that is just spectacular to have. A really light knife with the really high-end steel, with the subframe locks on them. I mean, who doesn't get turned on by that? And, of course, you know, the deep pocket clips, you know, again, it's just one of those knives that I had to own because there was a lot of things on it that I liked. And of course, here's another one, the Spyderco swayback. This is the latest offering. I'm going to put this knife away. This is the latest offering, again, from Spyderco 2020, the swayback. This is the first, not first, but this is actually my first time ever seeing a slip joint looking knife. That you can flick. I mean, I've always wondered, wouldn't it be great to have a slip joint or a slip joint looking knife that you can flick? I wish they actually came out with a knife that had that, and of course Spyderco eventually did. I mean, this knife is just absolutely fantastic action, and the steel being CTS XHP is no slouch. The most attractive feature, the reason I really got this knife was, yes, it looks like a slip joint, but really the Wharncliffe style blade is what turned me on about that. The fact that you can cut anything, whether it's at the tip of the blade, the middle of the blade, or the back end of the blade, you're applying the same amount of pressure to cut an item. You don't have to kind of move your arm in any angular or your wrist in any angular way to maintain that same pressure, because the cut along the knife is all the way straight across. So no matter what you're cutting, you're going to get the same consistency without having to apply any more pressure than, say, a knife that's got, you know, a curve on it, like, say, this knife here. Once I get to the tip, obviously, if I want to slice something, I have to kind of point my arm down a little bit and press to continue that same pressure, whereas on a Wharncliffe style blade, it's all the same pressure no matter where you place the blade on the item that you're cutting. And I think that was just so really awesome. Plus the fact that the action on this knife was amazing, and the fact that it looked like a slip joint. Really great looking frame lock. Marcin Swish, probably one of my favorite knife makers. He seems to be one of the few knife makers that I love, who just hits all the right points between the custom world and the production world. He seems to walk that line, which is probably why the Spyderco Swish Bowie was discontinued, because it cost too much to make, with the titanium having to be contoured. That costs a lot of money to get a machine to do that. Obviously, you know, a custom knife maker could probably do that. Yes, it would be costly, but I mean, to be able to create the same custom looking effect by having the handle be curved like that, using machines, that costs a lot of money. So that's probably why they discontinued this knife, because it was just too costly to make. I mean, the amount of detail they did on that knife, from just the ridges on the backspacer leveling with the scales, I mean, that's just absolutely ridiculous. It doesn't even stick out. Just that kind of attention to detail, and having to do that on a large scale, you know, production knives machine. I mean, they make these by the thousands, and to pay that much attention, knowing you're going to make that many of these knives, that's a pretty difficult thing to pull off by Spyderco. You have to give them great applause for that. And I seriously believe they did the same thing with the swayback, with the contoured handle. That cannot be a simple thing to do on a knife. You know, because everybody knows that titanium, when you see titanium, it's almost always just a flat surface, which everybody knows doesn't feel real good in your hand. But you start adding some roundness to that titanium, it starts to feel really, really good in the hand. So those are the reasons why those knives are in my collection. They each kind of, each of these knives kind of just got me in a way that they had to wind up in my collection. Now, there are a lot of knives out there that a lot of people praise. The Paramilitary 2 is one perfect example. I probably will wind up with that knife in my collection, but I want to see something special in that version. There are tons of special versions of the Paramilitary 2. I'm probably going to have to pick one and just make sure that winds up in my collection also somewhere down the line. Like I said, I've never owned a Paramilitary 2 before. I try to tend to pick knives that are just, I mean, something that I know I'm going to want to keep in my collection forever, because I don't want to do that thing again where I buy a knife, it stays with me for a while, I get bored, I sell it off, get something else. I'm tired of that cycle. I just want a bunch of knives that are going to stay in this collection, and I'm not going to wind up selling them. I'm sure a lot of you knife collectors are feeling that same thing as well. You know, I'm not saying it's not a fun thing to do, but I mean, after a while, you know, you kind of feel like you're going on a merry-go-round. What are you doing with all these knives if you're not going to use them, if they're not going to be, you know, at least appreciated long enough for you to really get into them? And I think that's the whole point of showing you these knives, is that these knives have really been gotten into. Each one of these knives has been really well used quite often, and in some cases, me buying a knife with stonewash on it where you can't tell that it's actually been used quite heavily, because I can always wipe that down with a little water and a rag and just wipe it all off, wipe off all the imperfections, put them on camera, and they look almost practically brand new. But believe it or not, this Kershaw knife has seen its day in boxes, cutting after cutting rope, cutting tons of stuff. Same thing with this Knockout. I mean, I've used them. But, you know, like I said, I don't like people to know that I've used them, or they all look, because you guys have seen those videos where people just have, like, tons of, like, sticky stuff all over their knives and everything. It just doesn't look attractive, so I try and make sure that I'm using my knives as much as they are, but I also want to kind of, like, keep them clean and pretty on camera, and having them be blackwashed and stonewashed, yeah, it kind of helps, you know, definitely. Which is probably why the Spyderco Swish bowie has probably always been wiped down quite a bit, but it has been used. It has been used. That's been sharpened a couple of times. So there you have it. 6 of my favorite production folders and why I own them. I just pretty much wanted to talk about these knives and share with you why I like these knives and why I have them in my collection. I'm sure you guys have a set of knives like these. It just took me a long time to get to these 6. And there's going to be more. I'm giving up on the idea of just, you know, only having 3 or 4 production knives. It's not going to happen. But I am going to have a lot less production knives than a lot of people, simply because I've moved on to custom knives. But I'm going to keep production knives in my radar, in my knife collecting, because, you know, I got to be honest, I love them. I do love production folders. A good production folder is something that you can really appreciate and enjoy. So this is Omar, the Knife Shark Guy, just going over some of his production knives that I absolutely love. And stick around a little bit. I am going to do an unboxing of my latest production knife. Can't wait to show that to you, because that one's been on my radar for quite a bit. So this is Omar, the Knife Shark Guy. Hope you enjoyed this video. And I will talk to you guys in just a few minutes, because we got an unboxing to do. See you later, guys. Happy knife hunting.